tension-filled moments. How do you deal with disunity in leadership? How do you deal with disunity in leadership?
I'll let Bobby answer that one just for fun.
Over to you, Bobby.
Well, there isn't any room for us to not be unified, because any place that we're not shows itself magnified across the team. So speaking just about the four of us, Pastor Craig, myself, and the two others that kind of form that leadership team, there have been times where, we weren't aligned. There were moments that there was just some separation that happened, there's five of us at this time, there's four right now, we used to have a fifth, not because we got rid of the fifth, but he retired. But he might have been involved in some of the conflict back in that time as well. But there were times that where because we weren't communicating well, because there might have been a little bit of trust that eroded, and there was, you could kind of say fault on all sides. It came to sort of a boiling point, and we've tried to always be very transparent, and that I think is a kind of hallmark of our team. Sometimes that means there's excessive feedback, and sometimes it can be heated, feedback. But during that time, I would say that the one I'm particularly remembering of, it happened at my house, which is why I really remember it a lot. We had a moment where we all had some excessive feedback, that was taking place, and
that's how he brands it now.
Yeah.
I got different words for it. I'll tell you later.
But basically, it was a very healthy process, even though it had a lot of risk to it, because it was one of those moments that looked like, if you don't work this out, this is going to be the end of this, And if it's the end of this, then it will have an impact on the church, And what that looks like, who knows? God's, obviously the church is resilient, but it involves humility on everybody's part. Pastor Craig really led with humility in the midst of it. Wasn't that he had done something wrong, or that, it was really that he just said, I need you to trust me.
Good.
And if you can't do that, basically this is over. But he asked for forgiveness for the things that we were in conflict over, and led with it. And he led. That's really what it came down to. He led through it. But he allowed, as a leader, he's unique in that kind of, he allowed that whole thing to kind of become what it was, and for the communication to happen. Sometimes the concept of unity is to sort of push down the dissension, or to push down the disagreeing voice, to push down the thing that's like, you're not allowed to challenge this or talk about it or discuss it. So then what happens is it brews deep, right? It doesn't it's not discussed, but that's not how he's wired. He wants that to be talked about. He wants it to come out. Now, everything I've just described is happening in a room with the four of us. It's not happening like on this stage or some other place. And that's the only way it can happen, right? Is you have to have that trust that's built through that process. But if it doesn't get handled well in that room, then it does bleed out, right? It does come out into other places, even inadvertently. And so that was several years ago. Pastor Craig, was it 12 years ago, that particular time, 13? And it was one of those kind of dark moments, but it was also probably the foundation of today.
Yeah, so what's special is Bobby's the least tenured of our direction leadership team. We've all been together for 20 some odd years, and they have not left. I have not fired them, and that's pretty amazing. You don't see that very often. And to get to that, what you need is you need mutual humility. Meaning there have been many times where I've said, I was wrong, I'm sorry, and they've done the same thing. You need to be able to fight and still be friends, meaning we've hooked it up and we're still friends. This is really, really important. You need people like Bobby who will tell people like me the truth, and you need people like me to listen and receive correction. Then when he does something great, like Create YouVersion, he needs to get all the credit for it. It's none of mine, it's all his. Meaning, for him to stay, He needs to be able to create, and he needs to be able to fly, and he needs to be able to get credit for it. And I need to bless him to get more of that. And then, what's really, really important is if you're the senior leader, you have to allow for many things to be outside your preferences.
That's good.
And I cannot tell you how important this is. There are so many things I just don't love, but they're effective and they're important.
Very
And
good.
so we need to be unified around outcomes, but not around inputs. If I don't love the input, but the outcome's good and God honoring, then there may be a better way. And so you really have to have grace, humility, be able to fight. And then I'm just telling you, some of you, your biggest hindrance is that you're just too dang controlling. Meaning you've got to have things the way you want it. And you're limiting it. If everything's the way you want it, you're the limitation of what God wants to do. Because everybody doesn't like it.